The spectre of al-Qaeda hangs over the deadly attack on French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo. The group in Yemen says it masterminded the bloody rampage as revenge for insulting Islam. A one-off attack or a broader warning to the West? This is Inside Story. Hello, a warm welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Seeker. Now, the fallout from the attack on a French newspaper which published a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad has spread to Yemen, with further implications for France, the US and Britain. An offshoot of al-Qaeda in Yemen says it was behind the shooting of 12 people at the Paris offices of Charlie Hebdo. And according to US intelligence, at least one of the brothers involved in the attack trained or even fought in Yemen. A third suspect is said to have claimed allegiance to the Islamic State group in Syria and Iraq. French elite forces shot dead all three men on Friday in separate sieges in which 4 hostages were killed. To our discussion in a moment after we hear from Omar al-Saleh in Sana'a.
This attack took place in Paris, but it appears it could have originated thousands of miles away. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is based in Yemen, said in a statement that it directed the attack. A few hours after that statement, the AQAP, which is considered by the US as the most active branches of Al-Qaeda in the world, hailed what they called the Battle of Paris.
Some of the French people were impolite about the prophets of God, so some of God's warriors rose up and taught them the manners and the limits of freedom of speech. The people of France said it's better if you stop your aggression on Muslims so that you live in peace. But if you reject and choose war, then you will never enjoy peace and security.
But the clearest indication yet came from one of the Kawashi brothers speaking to a French media outlet.
We are the defenders of the Prophet. I, Sharif Quaishi, was sent by al-Qaeda in Yemen. I went to Yemen and Anwar al-Awlaki financed me.
He's referring to this man, US-born Yemeni cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, who was killed by a US drone attack in September 2011 north of Yemen. He was described by Western security agencies as the main influencer, recruiter and propagandist for the group. Awlaki and his group called for individual attacks in the West by European and US Muslims. Some experts suggest that the group is capable of carrying out attacks on a global scale.
Many factors helped al-Qaeda, the political turmoil, the cooperation between the government and America. US drone attacks helped the group gain more popularity and support within the tribes, and the last 3 years have been the most active for them.
The group seems to be involved on multiple battlefronts. It launched daring attacks against Shia Houthi fighters in recent weeks. Houthi fighters swept through the capital in September and now control 9 provinces. They say they want to end the spread of al-Qaeda and corruption. Critics say the Houthis are using al-Qaeda as a pretext to seize power. But al-Qaeda in Yemen remains dangerous and lethal. The Paris shooting is clear intelligence failure of the Yemeni intelligence and their European counterparts. But Yemen could be excused because the country is steps away from being a failed state. Omar al-Saleh, Al Jazeera, Sana'a.
A member of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula said France was targeted for its obvious role in the war on Islam, and he warned of continuing the group's policy of hitting the snake's head until the West retreats. It's focusing renewed attention on security and concerns that nationals are being radicalized by foreign influences to target their home countries. So let's get the thoughts of our guest for this Inside Story. In Paris, Anne Guidicelli, founder of Terror Risk, a consultancy firm on security risk. Joining us from Sana'a is abdul-ghani al-iryani, president of the Democratic Awakening Movement in Yemen. And completing our panel in London is Shoshank Joshi, senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI. Good to have you all with us. Shoshank Joshi, let me start with you. Before we get into who was behind this and the implications of all of this, how much of a security failure do you think this was on the part of the French authorities?
Well, first of all, these were not unknown quantities. As your segment just now showed, they had fought in Yemen, they had been jailed for attempting to fight in Iraq, they were connected to long-standing jihadist networks in Europe that go back 10, 11, 12 years, including those spanning across multiple European countries. And of course, one of the individuals, one of the suspects, had also been implicated in an attempted jailbreak only 2 years ago. So these were people on the radar of French intelligence. But I would caution against any jump to a conclusion that this was an intelligence failure by saying over the past couple of years, the French have experienced between 1,000 and 2,000 of their nationals traveling to Syria and Iraq to fight with the Islamic State. And no intelligence agency in any democratic state or in Western Europe has the resources to intrusively monitor and surveil thousands and thousands of people continuously for prolonged periods. Nor, I think, would any of us in Europe want that to be the case. And so we have no way of saying how bad a failure this was until we understand what the competing threats were and what limited information the French authorities had access to. And until then, I think it's a bit of sort of armchair strategizing to say that the agencies were somehow wrong to have prioritized other leads and deprioritized these ones, because in hindsight, everything is an intelligence failure, but at the time, it really isn't so easy.
Yeah, and Guidicelli, I mean, Shawshank makes the point there about the sheer volume of intelligence data involved here and surveillance. I mean, Western intelligence officials saying that the number of French nationals under surveillance for possible ties with these groups makes it harder for them to determine who poses an authentic threat. It appears they're overwhelmed, aren't they?
Well, that means that we have to review the whole strategy on fighting against terrorism. That means that our criteria to detect people are maybe not accurate and not, let's say, updated. Of course, it's difficult, we agree about that, of monitoring such a number of people. So that means also that we have to review or to question why we have that number. I mean, from what is the problem we have in our society to produce such a number? Also, we have to do that. And so I think there is now a kind of discussion inside French authority, I mean, on the political, judicial, intelligence and social sides. We have to have a global approach, not only how to detect people, but also why, also how to judge them, how we can reduce that influence, the propaganda coming from outside, also from inside. So the challenge is here.
Abdul-ghani, al-iryani, it's been widely reported about the connection that these men had with al-Qaeda in Yemen. And we're going to get into more detail on the Yemen connection a little bit later in the program. But just as far as the security issue here, is this indicative, do you think, of a broader challenge Western nations have in the fight against these groups?
I think Yemen is, of course, becoming a more serious problem in terms of terrorism. You see, we have had al-Qaeda and its affiliates in Yemen for 2 decades now. However, I think they are gaining more support and more membership of ordinary people are joining al-Qaeda and their affiliate Ansar al-Sharia because of the sectarian friction between a group of Shia fundamentalists called al-Houthi movement and Ansar al-Sharia and their Sunni affiliates.
All right, well,
so things are going to get worse.
We're going to talk a little bit more about al-Qaeda now. It has been increasingly overshadowed by the Islamic State, which broke from its ranks to declare a caliphate in Syria and Iraq. But the group is battling to stay relevant. Pakistan and Afghanistan are considered al-Qaeda's core bases, but in the past 5 years, it has become less centralized. Its influence has waned in Syria and Iraq as Islamic State gains ground. Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb has its roots in the Algerian civil war, but its reach has expanded across North Africa. In September, Al-Qaeda announced an expansion into the Indian subcontinent, taking in Myanmar, Bangladesh, the contested region of Kashmir, and parts of India. Then there's Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. The group claiming to be behind the Paris attacks is described by the US as the most active and dangerous of the affiliates. So if I could turn back to you then, abdul-ghani, al-iryani, talk about Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Is this a resurgent Al-Qaeda in Yemen, taking advantage of the unrest there and the emergence of the Houthi rebels, who are a Shia group, Al-Qaeda seeming to be uniting all of the Sunni groups inside Yemen against them? Is that something that they have been able to take advantage of?
Of course they have. I think the weakness of the state has been the main reason why Al-Qaeda expanded so much in the past few years. But I think something else, an additional element, is now given them advantage to gain new members, and that is the perceived conflict between a Sunni fundamentalist group, that's Al-Qaeda and its affiliates, and the Shia fundamentalist group, that's Al-Houthi movement. I think that allowing the two to come into contact could lead the country into sectarian war.
Shashank Joshi, how do you read the Yemeni connection in all of this? Is this more of a, can this be seen as a lone wolf attack that was inspired by the Al-Qaeda group in Yemen, or was this something more organized, part of a broader strategy?
I think we've become used to trying to categorize these attacks into one of two things: either completely spontaneous, independent, low-level lone wolf attacks, the Sydney hostage siege, the Canadian shooting in Parliament, and on the other hand, big, complex, structured plots, directed, funded, resourced, commanded, all from the outside, from the leadership of an organization. And I think what we have to conceptually understand is that there's a big spectrum, and attacks can lie anywhere along that spectrum. It's worth noting that if you go back to the US Embassy attacks in 1998, conducted by Al-Qaeda, the operatives themselves were only tasked in very general terms to strike at the embassies. Al-Qaeda's leadership didn't even know about the specific targets until after the attack was underway from ordinary news channels. What that indicates is, when we talk about AQAP claiming responsibility, we should be very, very skeptical indeed. As you say, they are under great pressure from ISIS, the Al-Qaeda network as a whole. They have to show some kind of continued relevance. AQAP itself, however successful it has been, it has ultimately been foiled in many of its most significant bomb plots of the past 5 or 6 years. And of course, using gunmen is not its usual method of operation. It's tried to put sophisticated explosives on planes. So in that context, while I think there is a clear Yemen link, and we have some evidence, of course, that the older of the two Kouachi brothers, the suspects in the Charlie Hebdo massacre, even met Anwar Awlaki when he was in Yemen, the senior figure in AQAP, it does not necessarily mean AQAP provided the weapons, gave specific targets, gave direct support. There may be an arm's length involvement, and I think we should be wary before concluding AQAP is somehow back in the game and that this is his first ever attack in Western Europe. The link could be a lot more murky than that.
And Giudicelli, how do you look at the Yemeni connection such as it is here?
Well, you know, we had some other French nationals joining the Yemeni group since those last years. It is now confirmed by the French authority that one of the gunmen, went to Yemen. And so, of course, you know, these two guys, they started to be radicalized since now 15 years. That means that they more than, I mean, each year, each step was made of new contacts, even in Yemen. That means that what your guests say is right about the fact that the project that they had was a project. Nobody, even the ACAP, didn't ask them to do that project. But you know those two guys, those gunmen, they knew that what their project was in line with that ideology. What are the objectives of the group? So even one of them said to the French TV that he has been financed by Anwar al-Awlaki, which is probably wrong, because you don't need a lot of money and you can have your own arms. It's very easy, let's say, to find weapons nowadays in the suburbs of Paris, in a way. And you don't need a lot of financing to succeed in such operations. So what is important is that nowadays we don't care. I mean, it's not really important to know if it's coming from ACAP or Daesh. I mean, they are just following a kind of ideology. They find a project which is well adapted to that ideology, to the objectives that are, let's say, halal in their ideology, in that ideology, and that's it. I mean, of course, al-Qaeda or Daesh are probably using those operations in the Western countries to find a front of their own competition. That's it.
Yeah, abdul-ghani, al-iryani, what's your view on that? I mean, does it really matter whether it's al-Qaeda in Arabia or Daesh, which is the Arabic term for ISIL? I mean, they all essentially share the same ideology, don't they?
They're all one franchise. Basically, that's what it is. It's not really an organization. And the franchise issues the general directives and allows their individuals, the affiliates, or the members to carry out operations whenever they can. Very few of their attacks were centrally organized. I think that this, what's happening in the past few weeks, what has happened in Paris, is an example of people following the directive rather than the blueprint of a plan.
Yeah, if I could come back to Anne Judy Charlie, the fact that the perpetrators of these attacks in France were men who were essentially second-generation Arabs Muslims in France, born and raised there. There is this issue of the fact that they felt disconnected from France, that they didn't really feel French, and that this gets into the questions of multiculturalism. They grew up there, but yet they went back to places like Yemen, and they became radicalized. How do we make sense of all of that, do you think?
Okay, well, it's a very sensitive question in France, and it's not easy at all to address it. Let's say that, okay, they are even almost third generation, and you know that France has a policy not to have a communitary system, but integration system. That means that you have to be like us, those who come from outside and so on. So I think that is not now, is not just now, but since now many years. I consider that this policy, that system that we have, has shown its limit. That's the first point. The second point is that now the problem is no more even that not being integrated as an Arab to our secularism society. It's much more a feeling of exclusion. So as you can see, there is many young French people, I mean, they are not from Arab origin. They also went to Syria. They also radicalized. That means that it's no more a question of being Arab or even Muslim originally. So the question that now the society has to address is how we deal with the phenomena of exclusion that can lead to radicalization phenomena. And also that it's why I said at the beginning that we have also to include in this new global strategy of fighting against terrorism the criteria, the matter of the social matter, how we integrate people, not because they are Arab or Muslim originally, but how we integrate people in our society as being part of the society. And why these young people they join those groups? Because they feel that their identity, their nationality is no more in their own country. They feel they are not part of our society. So that is a very it's a concern. I mean, and
right.
If we don't address that issue, we will not have. Okay.
Shashank Joshi, are there questions that we need to be asking here about multiculturalism in Western Europe in general, not just in France, as to whether it has really succeeded here?
I think that those sorts of questions are often asked by rather unsavory types in Western Europe who have a pre-existing beef against any kind of religious or cultural minorities and wish to curtail their freedoms. I'm not sure this is the right time to have that conversation at all, actually. Maybe a separate time is. All I would say is there are many perfectly well-integrated Muslims in France. There is a very small minority who would ever contemplate violent acts. And if you look at it, it's very difficult to connect what they do with any specific grievances. Take the example of the younger Kouachi brother, Sharif Kouachi. He was 10 years ago attempted to go fight in Iraq against US troops to join the jihadists there. He was imprisoned. Now, France did not join the attack against Iraq, so the idea that Western foreign policy was responsible is fairly spurious. He said himself one of his grievances was Abu Ghraib, but that one of his own attempts at the time, his own ideas, was to attack Jews in Paris, as of course his accomplice eventually did 2 days ago. Again, absolutely no connection to Western foreign policy, merely an anti-Semitic attack. So I'm very wary of connecting the actions of a small group of fundamentalist, violent thugs with any kind of broader social issues, unless we have very clear evidence. I think what this calls for in the first instance is simply better intelligence, better law enforcement, and stopping the very small numbers of people who commit violent acts from doing so, rather than any debate over large-scale social engineering, a debate that, of course, in places like France, can all too easily be hijacked by the far right.
Yeah, abdul-ghani, al-iryani, just in the couple of minutes that we've got left, how do you see all of this? Should there be more of a focus on security and preventing attacks like this happening in the future, or are there issues that need to be addressed in terms of integration of the different groups in Europe?
Seems like it has fallen on me, the Muslim and the Arab, to say the bitter truth that it is the narrative of Islamists in Arab countries and Muslim countries that is creating this kind of hatred and violence. We have to address that before anything else. You cannot have airtight security system in Europe. And even if you do, what will happen to us? We are here. We're living with this violence. I think that before we look at how to better deal with the minorities and the West, we have to look at how we can stop this flow of hatred coming from religious clerics, which is being embraced by sociopaths and psychopaths, and is reflecting in tremendous massacre across the world. For every Muslim that they kill, for every non-Muslim that they kill hundreds of Muslims. It's just, we are not, we shouldn't stop at dealing with the symptoms. We should look at the root cause, and the root cause is a combative, xenophobic, religious groups in the Arab world that should be stopped. And I think that the states of the Arab world and the Muslim world have the responsibility of putting an end to this, not the West.
Yes, it will be very interesting to see how all of this does play out, but that is going to have to be the last word. Thank you to all of our guests, Anne Giudicelli, Abdul-ghani, al-Iryani, and Shashank Joshi. Thanks very much for being on Inside Story. And that's it for another edition of the program. Let us know your thoughts on this show or any other for that matter. You can post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or contact us on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.